You don't need permission to belong. The world hadn't invited him to that stage. He took his place anyway, with honesty, with heart. And in doing so, he proved, to them and to himself, that talent doesn't care where you're from, what you wear, or who your parents are. It only asks one thing: listen when it calls. So if you're wondering if you're good enough, if you're allowed, here's your answer: you are. Now go. Do it. They didn't look at the name on her boarding pass, just her clothes. Minutes later, those same employees would be standing face to face with the woman who signed their checks. But at that moment, all they saw was someone who didn't look like she belonged in first class. That's what they'd whisper about later, in hushed tones and awkward side glances. Monica Rhodes had arrived at gate AE-3 in Sacramento International Airport roughly 20 minutes before boarding began. She was dressed for comfort, a plain gray hoodie, relaxed fit jeans, and scuffed white sneakers. No makeup, no flashy accessories, not even a designer bag like the woman next to her, who was sipping a caramel latte and clutching her Louis Vuitton like a status badge. Monica carried only a slim leather folder under one arm and a phone with a cracked screen in her back pocket. When the gate agent announced boarding for first class, Monica rose and stepped forward without hesitation. A few people glanced up, registered her presence, then looked away. Nothing unusual. But the moment she reached the aircraft door, the atmosphere shifted. The flight attendant at the entrance, hair pulled into a tight blonde bun, face unreadable, barely looked at her ticket. "Mom, this is first class," she said coolly. "You might be in the wrong group." Monica remained composed. "I'm in 2A," she said, showing her ticket. There it was, clearly printed. First class, row 2, window seat. The attendant narrowed her eyes, forced a smile that didn't quite reach her face. "Are you sure this isn't someone else's boarding pass? Maybe it was printed wrong." "No," Monica replied evenly. "I purchased it. That's my name." The line of passengers behind her was beginning to grow. A man in a navy blazer gave a pointed cough, checking his watch. A middle-aged couple exchanged glances. The flight attendant exhaled sharply. "I'll need to check with the supervisor. Please step aside." Monica didn't budge. "I'd prefer to sit down now, if that's all right." Her voice was soft but firm, respectful, but not yielding. Another airline employee appeared, younger, in uniform, trying to paste on a reassuring smile, but her eyes betrayed the fact she already knew what was happening. "She claims she's in first class," the older attendant said, her tone edged with doubt. The younger one turned to Monica. "Hi there. Let's just confirm things real quick, okay? Can you step over here with me?" It wasn't the words, it was the tone. The kind people use when they're trying to calm down a situation that hasn't even escalated. "I'm not sure what needs confirming," Monica replied, steady. "That's my name, my seat, and my ticket." A man in line muttered something under his breath. A teenager behind him gave a quick laugh. The older attendant crossed her arms. "If this is going to be a problem, we can have you board after everyone else is seated." That's when a voice from the cabin broke the silence. "Let her board," came the clear words of a woman seated in 1B, somewhere in her 60s. "She has a ticket. What else do you need?" The attendants didn't respond. Monica took a slow breath in, then released it calmly. She pulled her phone from her pocket, unlocked it, and made a quiet call. "Hey, I'm at the gate already. Can you come up?" she said simply. No raised voice, no titles, no threats. The call ended in seconds. She put the phone away. Still calm, still steady, she stepped aside as asked, not with defeat, but with quiet dignity, like someone used to moments like this. Moments she never should have had to grow used to. The passengers kept boarding. Some stared, others pretended not to. The woman in 1B looked back again, longer this time, like she saw something different now, something that made her sit a little straighter in her seat. A small girl in row 4 looked up from her juice box, curious. Even she could feel it. Something important was unfolding. They just didn't know what yet. But that phone call, that was the shift. The plane hadn't left the ground, but the balance of power already had. It wasn't the first time this had happened. A man rose behind Monica, wearing silver-rimmed glasses and a Stanford Law sweatshirt, leaned slightly toward his wife and murmured, "She probably scanned the wrong gate." His tone wasn't angry, just confident. He never even paused to consider that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she belonged. The younger flight attendant tried to ease the tension. "We just have to follow standard procedure. Hope you understand." Monica didn't respond right away. She glanced at the name badge, Caitlin, and nodded once. "I understand more than you realize." Her words weren't sharp, but they landed. You could feel the energy in the cabin shift. One of those moments when everyone knows something has changed, but can't quite explain why. 2 minutes passed, then 3. Monica didn't move, barely even blinked. The senior flight attendant kept her arms crossed. Caitlin looked to her for guidance but got none. Then, voices up front. The jet bridge door opened, and in stepped a man in a gray blazer, badge clipped to his chest. Not TSA, not security, he looked like management. Someone who didn't usually walk onto a plane mid-boarding. He scanned the cabin, found Monica, and his face lit up. "There you are," he said with a warm smile, walking directly to her. The older flight attendant stiffened. "Miss Rhodes, I'm so sorry for the delay," he said, arms slightly open like someone greeting a respected friend. Then he hugged her, genuine, without hesitation. Heads turned. Passengers shifted in their seats. The man in the Stanford sweatshirt frowned. The couple to Rose's back looked confused. The teenager leaned forward to watch. Monica returned the smile, small, reserved. "Appreciate you coming." "Of course. Had to make sure everything was smooth. First time flying one of your jets in a while." "Couple months." She turned to Caitlin and the senior attendant, both now completely silent. "I believe there was some confusion about my seat." The regional director took the crumpled boarding pass still clenched in Caitlin's hand, verified it, then looked directly at the older flight attendant. "She's in 2L. She always sits in 2L. Then to Monica, "Would you like someone to walk you to your seat?" "I've got it." She stepped past them, finally walking the few feet she'd been blocked from. As she moved down the aisle, the silence hung heavy. Some passengers looked away. Others stared. The girl in row 4 peeked up again. Her mom whispered something. "She owns the airline." The child's eyes widened. "She does." Her mother nodded. "Built it herself." In seat 2A, Monica eased into the cushion like it was made for her. She buckled in, placed the leather folder on her tray, and looked out the window, without another word. The regional director nodded once to the crew and stepped off the aircraft. For nearly a minute, no one said a thing. Then the older attendant whispered, almost to herself, "Why didn't she say who she was?" Caitlin didn't answer. She just stared at the floor, biting her lip. "Because sometimes, you shouldn't have to explain who you are." And Monica's silence had said more than any title ever could. Boarding continued, slowly, awkwardly. Each person who passed Monica glanced her way. Some looked guilty, others, curious. One man gave a respectful nod, as if trying to apologize for what had just happened. She didn't nod back, not out of rudeness, just exhaustion. Caitlin moved up and down the aisle, checking bins, but her mind wasn't fully there. She kept glancing toward Monica, as if trying to make sense of something she didn't want to admit. The senior attendant had retreated to the back of the plane, leaving Caitlin to absorb the fallout alone. Meanwhile, the man in the Stanford sweatshirt fidgeted with his wedding ring. He wasn't listening to his wife anymore. His thoughts were loud enough. He'd made assumptions, and they were wrong. At 10:37 a.m., the cabin door sealed. Engines powered up. "Flight attendants, prepare for departure," the captain announced over the PA. Monica didn't look up. Caitlin returned to the front, hesitated at 2A, and swallowed. "Would you like a glass of water or orange juice before takeoff?" Monica met her eyes, steady. "No, I'm good." Caitlin nodded, paused, then Monica added, gently, "But thank you for asking." Just 5 words. But Caitlin's face flushed. That was her lesson, given without malice, but still unmistakable. The plane began to taxi. In row 4, the little girl had her face pressed to the window, but she wasn't looking at the clouds. She kept sneaking glances forward, trying to see the woman who had changed the whole flight. Her mother leaned in and whispered, "She used to sleep in her car. Now she's flying in one she owns." The girl blinked. She did. Her mom nodded. And she didn't yell, didn't raise her voice. She just stood there. As the jet lifted off, a heavy stillness remained. Not tension, but reflection. People were quietly rewriting the assumptions they had made just minutes earlier. By cruising altitude, Caitlin stepped through the curtain with a tray. She stopped by Monica again. "I brought you the orange juice anyway," she said softly, "just in case." Monica gave her a quiet, tired smile, took the glass, and replied, "Thank you." It was a small moment, but a real one. And for Caitlin, it mattered. 20 rows back, the law professor tapped open a blank note on his iPad. He started typing. No one knew what it was. Maybe a blog post. Maybe a letter he'd never send. Maybe something just for himself. The captain's voice came back over the speaker to announce the weather and flight time, but no one really heard it. Because something had shifted. Power on the ground didn't always mean power at 35,000 feet. Not when Monica Rhodes was into a calm, steady, and owning the very wings beneath them. It wasn't just shock anymore. It was something deeper, the kind of discomfort that leads to truth, if you let it. The growth came slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. By the time she turned 39, the airline Monica had built operated a dozen planes, flying routes across 6 states, Short hops like Sacramento to Boise, Reno to Phoenix, Flagstaff to Salt Lake City. Each flight carried more than passengers. It carried a promise, comfort, dignity, and trust. Monica avoided the limelight. She declined magazine interviews, skipped the conference keynotes, and showed up to board meetings in denim and quiet resolve. She listened more than she spoke. When executives urged her to project a more polished image, she calmly pushed back. Shine doesn't keep planes in the air, she told them. People do. But staying under the radar came with its own price. In terminals, travelers often mistook her for a staff member. Some asked her for directions. One man even handed her his empty coffee cup with a casual, "Thanks, sweetheart." She never made a fuss. She remembered it all. Back in her seat on the flight to Portland, Monica took a steadying breath. Her orange juice was still cold. She took a small sip. To most on that flight, she'd become a story, something they might retell later at a party. You won't believe what happened on my flight. But for Monica, it was just another Tuesday, just another moment where she didn't look like she belonged, until people realized she did. And yet, what happened next wasn't about her anymore. It was about what people chose to do once they truly saw her. Somewhere over northern Nevada, the tension shifted, not gone, just changed form. The whispers had stopped. The cabin held the kind of quiet that follows something meaningful, a hush that said, that mattered. Monica sat with her tray table down, leafing through a printed report, performance charts, schedules, operational notes, work, the kind of daily detail most never saw. Meanwhile, Caitlin, the flight attendant, was now moving through the rows with drinks, though her eyes kept drifting toward seat 2A. She wanted to say something, maybe apologize, maybe explain, but each version she rehearsed in her mind sounded like an excuse. So she focused on the service. A few rows back, the law professor sat motionless, staring out the window, hands folded, lips sealed. The look on his face spoke of a comment swallowed too late. Regret lingered, quiet, but real. In row 4, a young girl hadn't stopped watching Monica. "Mom," she whispered, tugging on her sleeve, "can I say something to her?" Her mother hesitated. "What do you want to say?" "I don't know. Just, she's cool." Her mom smiled gently. "You can tell her that when we land." "But what if she leaves too fast?" "She won't. People like her. They move different." In the row ahead, an older man slightly turned his head. He said nothing, but something in his expression shifted. Back in first class, Monica folded the report, tucked it away, leaned her head against the window, and closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to gather herself. Then Caitlin approached, careful and quiet, napkin in hand. "Miss Rhodes," she began. Monica looked up. "I just wanted to say, I didn't know. I didn't mean to be disrespectful." Monica paused. Disrespect doesn't always come from intention. Sometimes it's just habit. The words weren't harsh. They were true. Caitlin blinked, searching. "I've been flying for 3 years. I've never seen something like that." Monica raised a brow. "Maybe you have. Maybe you just didn't notice it." A beat passed. "I'll do better," Caitlin said. "I hope so, but not just for me." Caitlin gave a solemn nod and returned to the galley. A small pocket of turbulence jostled the cabin. A few passengers straightened. Monica didn't flinch. In seat 1B, the older woman who had defended Monica during boarding leaned toward the aisle. "You handled that with grace," she said softly. "I've had practice," Monica replied. The woman chuckled. "They never see it coming, do they?" "Not until they're forced to." She sipped her tea, then added, "When I was younger, I couldn't even enter the terminal from the front. My first flight, I walked up from the tarmac, like sneaking in through the back door." Monica smiled. "Things do change." The woman shook her head. "Some things. Some people. Not always." But something had shifted on that plane. It started when a young girl saw someone who looked like her do something powerful without ever raising her voice. The descent into Portland began with a calm glide. Below them, clouds rolled like a silent ocean. Inside the cabin, the silence had softened. It wasn't stiff anymore. It felt reflective. Monica wasn't asleep. Her eyes were closed, her thoughts alive. She replayed what happened, not in anger, but with quiet clarity. She'd seen this scene before. Different cities, different people, same undertone. But today felt different, not because she was surprised, but because they were. And that stayed with her. When the landing gear thudded into place, she opened her eyes. Caitlin was back at her row. "I don't mean to bother you," she said, fidgeting slightly. "But can I ask something?" "Sure," Monica said. "Go ahead. What do you want people to take away from today?" Caitlin hadn't planned to ask that, but it came out anyway. Monica thought for a moment. "That we need to stop judging people by how expensive their shoes are, or how loudly they enter a room." Caitlin nodded. "And," Monica added, "it's okay not to know something, but once you do know, you have a responsibility to act differently." Caitlin opened her mouth, then closed it again. She nodded and stepped away. A few rows back, the young girl had unbuckled early, already moving up the aisle. "Sweetheart," her mom called, reaching to stop her, but she was already at seat 2, a juice box in hand. "Hi," she said, eyes wide. "Are you really the boss of the plane?" Monica smiled. "Something like that." The girl lit up. "You look like my auntie." Monica tilted her head. "Is that a good thing?" "Yeah," the girl laughed. "She's super smart and always wins at a no." "Well," Monica said, "that's high praise." The mother caught up, gently placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Sorry, she's a little bold." "No apology needed," Monica replied. "She just said more truth into sentences than most people say in a whole flight." The mother paused, then leaned in. "For what it's worth, you handled that with more grace than I think I would have." Monica nodded. "It's not about me. It's about what she saw, and what she'll remember." Back in seat 17D, the man in the Stanford sweatshirt opened his phone. He stared at the blinking cursor, then typed, "Prejudice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands in the doorway, blocking the way." He wasn't sure if he'd post it, but it needed to be written. The seatbelt signs chimed. The plane touched down. A few claps broke out. Less excitement, more release. Everyone stayed seated, except Monica. She stood, folder tucked under her arm, and walked down the aisle. This time, people made space. Not because they knew her name, but because they realized they should have made space all along. The real weight of it wouldn't land until much later, when people got home. When the story left the cabin and entered kitchens, text threads, late-night conversations. Monica exited through gate C5 with the same steady pace she had coming in. No rush. No need to glance back. A black sedan waited at the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. "Good morning, Ms. Rhodes." "Morning, Devon. Thanks for being prompt." "Always." She stepped in. No reporters. No headlines. Just another traveler leaving the airport. Except, she wasn't. Not to the people who had seen. Inside, Caitlin stood at the gate window, watching ground crews prepare the return flight. Same route, same crew, but she was not the same. That evening, she'd talk to someone, maybe her roommate, maybe her mom, and try to explain. She'd get halfway through and stop herself. "You had to be there," she'd say. In another part of the terminal, the young girl tugged her mother's hand. "Do you think I could fly one of her planes someday?" Her mom smiled. "You could do more than that. You could own them." The girl didn't answer. She just looked ahead, quietly certain, like it wasn't just possible, like it was already decided. And the man in the law sweatshirt. He sat at a charging station, typing, not a review, but something new, something personal, about pride, mistakes, how quickly people assign value with a glance. He wasn't writing to impress. He was writing to tell the truth. And Monica. She never mentioned the incident to headquarters. No emails. No formal complaints. The regional director texted asking if she wanted the crew disciplined. She replied with one line, "Use it as a training moment, not a punishment." He called later. "You sure? I didn't do this to shame anyone," she said. "I came here to fly." "You handled that with class." She didn't respond. Because that wasn't the point. It wasn't grace. It was restraint. A burden she shouldn't have had to carry, but did. Because people like her often do. And somehow, they still leave room for grace. By the time the sun dipped over Portland, the story had already begun to move. Not trending online, not splashed across the news, but passed in kitchens, during walks, in texts between friends. Stories like that don't need to go viral. They just need to stay. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone sees a woman board a plane in sneakers and a hoodie, no badge of status or title, they'll wait before assuming.